You were told that after World War II, our food system got better, and that what vanished must have deserved it. Before the war, families on remote Japanese islands leaned on a humble leaf crop for everyday nutrition. After Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945, the rebuilt food system pushed it back out of sight. That is the paradox. It didn't disappear because it was unsafe or useless. It disappeared because it was inconvenient to standardize, to ship, and to sell at scale. And here's the twist that still feels unfair. Decades later, modern research started pointing at why the plant was worth attention. In Nature Communications, February 19, 2019, scientists reported that a natural compound called 4,4-dimethoxychalcone could trigger autophagy. Autophagy is not a buzzword. It is cellular cleanup. Your cells recycle damaged parts, so the system keeps running instead of getting clogged over time. So if a war-era family food could survive scarcity and still show up in peer-reviewed science, why did it end up as a footnote instead of a staple? Before World War II, a lot of people pictured Japan as neat rice fields and tidy markets. But life on the outer islands could be harsh. Humid weather, real storms, and one simple rule. If a boat did not come, you ate what you could grow. When the war economy tightened, the margin got thinner. Japan passed the National Mobilization Law in 1938 to control labor and materials for the war effort. By 1940, rice was under rationing. That tells you how quickly normal food turned into a managed resource. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. Governments under pressure prioritize staples that can be counted, stored, and distributed. That is how you keep factories running. That is how you keep armies moving. And if your household is far from the main routes, you adapt. You choose tough plants that tolerate neglect. You repeat simple meals because repetition is stability. You build a routine around what reliably comes back after harvest. That kind of food is not glamorous, but it keeps a family steady when everything else becomes uncertain. And honestly, that still hits hard. It was never about trends. It was about survival. The plant has a name, and once you hear it, you can tell it was never meant to be a product slogan. It is called Ashitaba. Botanically, Angelica keisuke, a perennial in the carrot family, native to parts of Japan's Pacific coast and the Izu Islands. People call it tomorrow's leaf. Cut a leaf, and under good conditions, a new sprout can show up by the next morning. That is where the nickname comes from. And if you have ever seen it cut fresh, you notice the detail that sticks. The stems release a distinctive yellow sap. That yellow sap is where researchers are focused when they analyze its natural compounds. In everyday life, though, Ashitaba was not a lab story first. It was a kitchen story. It shows up in regional food as a normal ingredient, cooked into dishes like tempura, brewed as tea, the kind of thing a family repeats because it is there, it grows, and it fits the rhythm of daily meals. Here is the part that matters for this series. Whether a food becomes mainstream is the result of a choice, not an accident. The modern system rewards what can be standardized, shipped, and branded. A resilient local plant does not always fit that incentive. On those Izu Islands, the reason a family would lean on Ashitaba was not mysterious. It was practical. The plant grows vigorously in coastal conditions where fussier crops struggle. People could cut what they needed and, under good conditions, see new growth quickly. That matters when you are feeding a household where shipments are not guaranteed, and weather can decide the menu. During the war years, Japan moved into tighter control and rationing of basic foods. A national rationing system began in 1940, covering staples like rice. That pushed more families to rely on whatever was reliably available outside the ration line. In that context, a tough, leafy plant used as everyday food is not a superfood. It is a stabilizer. It lets a family feel like life still has a rhythm, even when the world does not. And here is the part this series keeps coming back to. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. A family chooses what will not fail them first, because survival rewards reliability, not marketing. Modern science did not stumble onto Ashitaba because it was trendy. It looked because the plant carries unusual chemistry that is easy to test. In Nature Communications, February 19, 2019, researchers studied a flavonoid called 4,4-dimethoxychalcone, shortened to DMC. They found longer life effects in classic research organisms, yeast, roundworms, fruit flies. The key detail was not magic, it was mechanism. The effect depended on autophagy. Autophagy sounds technical, but think of it like this. A cell is a busy workshop. Things break, parts wear out. Autophagy is the cleanup crew that dismantles the junk and recycles the useful pieces, so the workshop keeps running instead of jamming up. The paper describes autophagy-dependent longevity across species. Careful wording, meaning the cleanup pathway was essential, and the effect appeared in multiple organisms. And here is where the story tightens into the two-whack pattern. What became mainstream after the war was not selected only by nutrition. It was selected by incentives. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. A system built around standardization and scale elevates foods that travel, store, and sell cleanly. It sidelines local plants, even when science later finds a rational reason to study them. That truth feels uncomfortable, because it is ordinary. After the war, the rules of food changed faster than most people realize. Not because anyone was evil, because incentives shifted. Japan was under Allied occupation until April 28, 1952. The country had to rebuild supply chains, farms, and daily diets under pressure to stabilize life. In that kind of rebuild, the system rewards foods that can be standardized, measured, transported, stored, priced, with minimal surprises. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. A post-war food system is engineered for scale, and scale loves uniformity. Anything that stays local, grows in a narrow climate, or resists becoming a predictable commodity, tends to get pushed to the edges. Even if it fed real families, when survival mattered more than branding. And here is where the Ashitaba story stops being a Japanese plant and starts being a mirror. In the United States, the post-war decades rewarded convenience, processing, advertising, paying more for foods with built-in services because that is where the money flows, when a society gets richer and busier. So the big question is not whether Ashitaba was good or bad. The question is whether it fit the shape of a system built for industrial distribution. A leaf that thrives on specific islands stays tied to local kitchens and does not naturally plug into mass shipping is exactly the kind of thing that gets sidelined. Right here, the narrator needs the audience to take a side. If you think this makes sense, that a food can be left behind, simply because it does not match the incentives of scale. Comment the number 9. If you do not agree, and you think the market only keeps the best foods, hit like to show you reject that idea. And keep listening, because the next step makes this vivid. How a family used this plant in everyday meals, and why that normal routine mattered. What happens next is where a lot of people get confused. They picture a ban. The real story is paperwork and incentives. In the United States, a company that wants to sell a new ingredient broadly in foods usually needs a safety rationale that fits the system. A common route is a GRAS conclusion, supported by documentation. There is also a different route for dietary supplements, and there are strict limits on what supplements can claim. They cannot claim to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. So someone has to pay for science summaries, safety reviews, compliance work, legal work. That can be serious money. And here is the incentive problem. A leafy plant is hard to lock up as a private advantage. If one company spends big to clear the path, competitors can often sell the same plant right after. That is a weak business case. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. The system rewards what can be standardized and monetized with predictable returns. So a plant like Ashitaba can end up in a strange place. Interesting enough for research, real enough for tradition, but not aligned with the structure that makes foods mainstream. For an American over 60, the real loss here is not a trendy plant you never tasted. The loss is the menu itself, the range of everyday foods that used to exist before modern shopping trained everyone to live inside a narrow aisle. Industrial food got unbelievably good at one thing: making the same products available everywhere, all year, with the same look and the same promise. That convenience is real, and it helped a lot of people, but it also trained families to forget regional foods, seasonal foods, homegrown foods. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. A system built to feed millions cheaply rewards uniform crops and repeatable products. It pushes local survival foods into the background, even when those foods were the reliable nutrition families depended on in harder years. Now the narrator asks a question that forces an honest answer. Think of one food your grandparents ate that you almost never see today. Not because it was dangerous, because the world changed around it. If that feels true in your family, comment the number 9 and name the food. If you think none of this matters and the market always keeps the best options, hit like to show you disagree. A leaf gets cut, and the next day it comes back. That is why people called it tomorrow's leaf. And it is also the cleanest metaphor for this channel. Knowledge can get trimmed out of the mainstream for decades and still be alive in the places that never stopped using it. This is the result of a choice, not an accident. The modern food system chose scale and uniformity because it solves real problems. But the cost is real too. It quietly decides which foods deserve attention and which ones stay invisible. If you agree that post-war incentives can erase practical foods that once fed families, comment the number 9 right now. If you do not agree, and you think the system only filters out the weak, hit like to show you reject the idea. And if you want the next episode, subscribe, because every week we recover one more thing that got left behind when the world got rebuilt.